was intrigued because you and I have had this discussion before, and I've been very willing to give you that jurisdiction if we can, although we are working on a government-wide attempt to save quite a bit in health care cost. The question I have is, if we were, and again, Mr. Guffey will be back in a minute, I'm sure, but if we were to give you that authority, allow you to do it, and essentially give you back, quote, your pre-funding, would the federal government be off the hook? And if so, how would we eliminate the contingent liability if, let's say, 20 years from now, there wasn't enough money, and ultimately retired postal workers look to the federal government as the bailout? You might remember the railroad retirement.
Mr. Chairman, we put together a proposal on the health care. What we proposed was that we would take our plan over Postal Service-wide. The key to success with that plan will also be able to cover the retirees. Now, we have had discussions with the unions. There's been some suggestions from Mr. Rolando, as you remember at the last hearing,
yes,
that we try to organize that under FEHB because there has been a concern from the employees of not moving away from FEHB. From our perspective, we're okay either way as long as we get the savings. The savings are what's key to us. If I could put a chart up here.
Sure, if they have it.
Yes,
there it
is. If I could explain, this chart is the key to the $8 billion savings. If you look on the far left, you'll see a $10,700 column. What that is, that represents the average health care cost for a 65-year and older postal retiree. On average, the Postal Service retiree pays that. We pay 70%, they pay 30%.
Right.
So if you take a look at the concurrent bar on the right, the largest bar, that represents where we are from a pre-funding perspective right now. We've got about $49 billion in the bank with another $46.9 billion on the hooks. It's $96 billion pre-funding. Now, we are required to make this. We are required to make these payments because this is the most affordable plan that you can get existing in the system right now, the FEHB system. The next chart, the next column over, you can see it says with Medicare A and B in the blue. The second one to the left.
I'm going to cut you short only in one sense. It is at least under consideration to move the entire federal health care retirement or health care benefit to one that would put Medicare in first position, as you were talking about doing.
That's excellent.
So if we do that with the entire federal workforce, including postal workers, if I understand correctly, that will take a substantial portion of the $8 billion you hope to save, in addition to the amount would be saved within the federal system.
If you require A, B, and D, we pay for everything now. The mailers pay for it. It's postage money. What happens is the farthest right-hand column, you can see we, in fact, would have a small surplus. We would have completely pre-funded everything we needed to do.
Okay, we'll follow up more on that. I wanted to make sure I understood it because our committee, of course, controls the entire federal workforce's benefits, and we are looking specifically at, and if the ranking member were here, I know he would chime in positively, we are looking at making sure that federal employees do not pay, and the federal government on behalf of federal employees do not pay more or less than Lockheed Martin, IBM, or any other private sector company. Currently, as you've said to us, and we've fact-checked it, the federal government is more generous to the savings, not of the federal worker necessarily, but of Medicare, which means we're not properly stating, and of course, as you know, since the mid-'80s, your postal workers and all federal workers have paid in to the system, so they're fully vested.
Yep.
Mr. Davis, are you ready to go? Yes, sir. Then it is my distinct pleasure to recognize the ranking member in presence, Mr. Davis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me thank you and the ranking member for moving us to the point where we've actually got legislative initiatives to take a good, hard look at. I want to thank all of the gentlemen for being here and testifying. We talk a great deal about the quality of service that is provided. And we've talked a great deal about universal service. Let me ask you, Mr. Donahoe, could universal service be maintained when the service standard requirements are degraded through unilateral and or arbitrary reductions in the workforce or by realignment of the network, that is the mail network? And there's the claim that we lose $25 million a day. Is that an assessment that we're pretty comfortable with?
Thank you, Congressman. Let me first off on the service standards. We measure everything. We measure first-class mail, commercial, first-class standard mail, and periodicals. Our people are doing a tremendous job, and right now everything we measure is showing us at all-time service levels, and that's from taking the mail all the way through delivery. And so with all the consolidations we've been doing, the people have been doing a very good job with that. One of the things that we're weighing for next year, we're looking at this system right now to figure if there is a way that we can maintain current service standards and continue to make the consolidations to absorb in the excess capacity that we have. That's a balancing point, and no final decisions have been made on that right now. But we think that as we have run through the first sets of consolidations, we find the service levels have held very high, and we do check this with our customers, both those who send mail through the blue mailboxes and as well as the commercial mailers. As far as the $25 million a day, that's a number that we have used based on the fact that we have not only had operating losses within the system, but we've had the loss that's been associated with the pre-funding. I think if you check today, this year we're going to finish our finances approximately about $1 billion better than we said in the beginning of the year, because we've had revenue increases, especially in the package business. We've been able to absorb those in. We've also been able to work and take advantage of negotiated contracts with Mr. Guffey and our other union leaders, and be able to reduce the rate of pay with the employees. So that's helped. So it's a little less than the $25 million a day right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask you a little bit about the 5-day delivery discussions that we've been having. Have you asked the PRC for an updated advisory opinion on the savings from moving to a 5-day modified delivery?
The last time we had an official discussion with them was last year when they came out with the savings statement of $1.7 billion. We think it's a little bit higher. There have been some other adjustments we've made, as you know, because we've said we would deliver packages, especially medications, on Saturday too.
Are we currently losing money on Saturday delivery?
Well, you could, when you take a look at universal service, you could look at pretty much by address. Some places you're always going to make money Monday through Saturday, and other places, just by as hard as it is to get to the places, you're going to lose. So from a fairness perspective, that's why we've made the pitch around Saturday, because it's the lightest day of the year, or lightest day of the week. It's a day of the week where you have fewer businesses open. So we've always tried to figure out, in order to maintain universal service to hard to reach places across the country, we would just go with the Saturday as the standard for everybody.
Well, let me just quickly, Mr. Guffey, given the continuous decline of mail volume, do you think that eliminating the postal monopoly on access to the mailbox would create a serious disadvantage for the Postal Service?
I think it would create a serious disadvantage for the American public. Keeping the monopoly on the mailbox is what keeps the Postal Inspection Service able to follow through and investigate problems with lost mail and what have you. If other people had routine access to postal mailboxes, I think that would deteriorate. The Postal Service, to have its universal service, needs that right. And if it doesn't have that right, then the universal service will deteriorate very fast in this country.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. We now go to the gentleman from Texas, the subcommittee chairman, Mr. Farrathall.
Thank you very much. I appreciate y'all all being here. I'll start with Mr. Quadracci. Did I get that right?
Quadracci.
Quadracci.
Quadracci, couldn't you get it right on the 15th time the way I finally did?
Here, everybody together, Quadracci.
Quadracci, all right. There was some testimony earlier on, and I'm sorry, I forget who made it, that as a result of some of the consolidations, and maybe it was just part of a question, there have been substantial delays in getting product delivered. Have you noticed that within your experience and for your customers?
I'd say in our experience over the last 2 years, the performance has been better than it's ever been. A couple of years ago, the Post Office put in a system to really help monitor performance throughout the network. Now, I want to be clear, I'm speaking about catalog, magazine, and direct mail. We have not seen those disruptions as they've realigned things. And we have better visibility to when there are disruptions. We can contact them very quickly and resolve the issues. So it's actually been quite good.
Thank you. And Mr. Donahoe, we're talking a lot about giving the Postal Service the flexibility to do what they need to do to be competitive in the 21st century. And the bills that the draft legislation you've seen, do we go far enough? Do we give you what you need to do that?
I think that, as I've stated before, it's our intention to continue to press for comprehensive legislation. We think that what the bills do in terms of the reamortization helps. It gives us some breathing space, but as the chairman said, you would be looking at overall health care federal system. I would strongly encourage that. I'd strongly encourage a good deal of competition in those systems and wring the prices out, because we know we're paying way too much now. So from that perspective, we think it's good. We like the fact that there's the 6 to 5 day considerations in there, and we would also like to encourage the continuation on flexibility with governance and pricing.
All right, and just so we get it in the record, and I know we've talked about this in subcommittee hearings, and I do want to make sure it's clearly in the record. Can you explain to us why mail volume is going down, and whether or not you see any way of turning that around?
Let's break it down into 3 categories: first class, commercial, standard, and packages. Packages are growing. We're seeing double-digit growth. It's been great, mainly tied in.
Even with competition from private carriers, that's growing.
Yes, and we compete with FedEx and UPS. We also work with FedEx and UPS as well as logistics, DHL. We provide a lot of last-mile delivery for them, so it's been growing in leaps and bounds. Very good. From a standard mail, advertising mail, Mr. Quadracci could tell you it's stabilizing. There's a lot more technology being applied in that area, so it gives the customers the ability to match up digital and physical, use it for advertising. We think that there's a nice growth opportunity. Where we're seeing drop-offs is first class. Single-piece mail, we've lost 60% of it in the last 10 years. People pay bills online. It's cost us about $14 billion in today's 46-cent stamp if we had that. The other area that we're worried about, it's been fairly stable, but that's commercial first class. Bills and statements, we've done a lot of work to try to keep people in that mail.
And with respect to some of the proposals, Chief Innovation Officer, you think that's probably a good idea, too?
I think that's a great idea. I think we pride ourselves on a lot of the innovations we've been doing now. I think that we work very well, listen to our customers. Our people, from a craft perspective, come up with a lot of good suggestions, too. I think it's a great idea, and we'd embrace it.
And we talk about drop in volume of first-class mail. Do you think there would be a more substantial or quicker drop in that if the standards of service dropped, where, for instance, if I dropped put a piece of mail in the mailbox at my house, put the little red flag up, now it gets to wherever it's going within Corpus Christi the next day. Right. If that went to 2 or 3 days within the city, do you think that would accelerate that drop substantially?
It certainly would if it was 3 days. We're looking at that now to try to figure out how, as we continue to shrink the network down, we can try to maintain some level of overnight service, but we've got to see where we're at in that.
All right. And I want to ask Mr. Guffey, do you see some areas for cost savings in innovation specifically that we need to address above and beyond the obvious issues of pre-funding and the stuff we normally talk about? Do you see some efficiencies we can find and some ways we can go that you and your folks could get behind? Have microphone, please, sir.
I think there are some opportunities at this time to work with the Postal Service on some of the health care issues. It's something that we recognize the problem, and the whole country has the problem. We think there's opportunities to sit down with the Postal Service and do something about the cost of the Postal Service for the retirees. In other words, it's not fair for the Postal Service to pay a full boat, the full cost of a health insurance plan for a person who's going to get most of his services from Medicare. Now, that is a tremendous cost to the Postal Service. We recognize that. But because they pay that much money for the retiree, that money goes into the health care system for the current employees. So, in this dynamics, there's going to be some shift of cost to the Medicare, and there's going to be a lot of shift to the current employees. Coming up and meeting that fine balance is something that we think we can do. I think all the unions can get together and work that out with the Postal Service. It's something we don't want to be required to do, but allowed to do.
All right. Well, I see my time has expired. I appreciate y'all's coming before the committee and testifying today. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman, and Mr. Donahoe, when I was explaining what we were doing with the health care, we were also doing the 1-2 family that you had proposed. So that was one of your other savings. Both of those would be included, which I think is another.
Thank you very much. That would really help.
Thank you. We now go to the gentleman from California who was one of the first back for 5 minutes. Mr. Contreras.
Thank you very much, and boy, am I tired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tried to rush back, and I guess it paid off.
You need to know the shortcuts.
Exactly. I'm learning. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the panel for being here and answering our questions. My first question is, according to the Congressional Research Service, Postal Service employees are the largest single pool of workers within the Federal Employees Compensation Act program, otherwise known as FECA. In its report, the CRS noted that, and I quote, "Postal workers are injured on the job at rates disproportionate to the rest of the federal government. Postal employees make up almost 22% of the federal workforce, but they account for almost 40% of the cases recorded in 2012. Mr. Donohue, do these figures sound correct to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Could you explain why the Postal Service accounts for such a large percentage of federal workers' compensation cases?
Yes, number one, the Postal Service, the work that our people do is hard work. If you think about today, in Washington, D.C., or anywhere up the East Coast, you've got letter carriers out in 95-degree heat delivering mail. If you go into our processing plants in the evening, where Mr. Guffey represents the people, that's a hard job. You're on your feet 8 hours a night, you're putting mail in a machine and taking mail out. We're very proud of the fact that in the last 10 years, the Postal Service, along working with the unions and working with OSHA, have been able to reduce workplace accidents as measured by illness and injury rate by 50%. And if you take a look at what's happened over that time, there's been a lot of work with ergonomics and whatnot. We still have a high injury rate. Any accident is unacceptable. We're proud of the fact that we've been able to push those rates down.
So basically, so that everybody understands, even in our most automated times that we've ever seen in the world and in this country, the Postal Service is still very manual intensive in the sense that, like you mentioned, postal workers walk door to door. They don't electronically meet people at their front door. In addition to that, we still have people who are actually, such as in warehouse type situations where they're moving goods, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay. So in general, I would assume that organizations who are still doing an intense amount of that kind of work have injuries in their workplaces more than perhaps maybe in an office setting in general.
I think that's true.
Okay. So also my next question is, does having a higher than normal injury rate reduce overall productivity and efficiency within the Postal Service?
Yes, that's why we focus so hard on making sure that we reduce the rates, because an accident is something that, has a cost in the short term, but what we also worry about is long-term injury to employees. You can get injured at work and carry a back injury for the rest of your lives. So that's why we focused on trying to reduce those.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier about the ways in which, or the methods that you've taken advantage of as a department. It such as ergonomics. What exactly, can you condense for that? What exactly does that mean? It sounds kind of foreign.
Well, if you think about what, on a nightly basis, a person would go and work on a certain machine, there's, work that we've done to help people learn to stretch better so that when they lift things or move things, that they don't have a tendency to hurt themselves. And then you can also employ various, pieces of equipment, some back support and things like that. These are all the things we've learned over the years where we've tried to reduce the accidents.
And they have been reduced, right?
Yes, 50% down in 10 years.
Okay. I think it's important for the taxpayer, or excuse me, the ratepayers to know that. In your April testimony before this committee, you asked Congress to reform the workers' compensation program, and specifically, you requested that the Postal Service, and I quote, "be provided with the ability to settle federal workers' compensation claims." This would allow the Postal Service and the employee to agree on a settlement, sever ties, and end the employee's receipt of FECA benefits. Why did you make that request, and is it practical, and do you still believe that we should give you that authority?
Yes, we believe it is. What we'd like to see, there is a bill presently being sponsored and being discussed. I don't know if where it is exactly right now between the Senate and the House, that talks about changing some of the retirement requirements for people on federal employee FECA to move people off FECA onto retirement. We support that. We would also like to have the ability to have a buyout process like the states do, where a person could take a buyout and go on with their lives. We have 17,000 people as we speak on the periodic rolls right now. It's going to cost us, we estimate about $16 billion in liability. We think that we could reduce that, let a person get on with life, they could go work somewhere else, and they would be off our rolls.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
My
you.
time's expired. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Micah, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I guess a lot of your costs, Mr. Donahoe, are related to labor, something like 80% of the cost.
Yes, 79%.
And how about benefits like health care and stuff like that? You seem to have a lot of issues with this so-called prepayment, but what percentage are the benefits?
In terms of benefits make up 48% of all postal salary and benefit costs.
Yeah. Now, the President's delaying, I guess, the employer mandate. What if we opened up for savings purposes, allowed the postal employees to join, well, actually just put them on Obamacare? What would you think of that?
Well, we have actually gone out and solicited in the private market and secured private insurance outside the federal system for our non-career employees. So we were.
So you wouldn't object if I have an amendment to open it up, what about mandate?
I would like to open it up for free competition. We'd like to go out and bid, get everybody to bid and give us the best price for health care. We don't do that now.
Well, how about you, Mr. Guffey? Would you like to either have a mandate or to open it up to Obamacare?
I think Obamacare was written in such a manner that a person could keep their current insurance, and we're very happy with our current insurance. Thank you.
Well, we're shifting some of the employees. I think members of Congress and also staff. And 40% of his cost, and it seems to be touted as such a economy saver for maybe reducing some of their costs. Maybe I could look at that and work on an amendment with you all when we get the bill up. Let's see. How many employees do you now have, Mr. Donahoe?
Currently, we have 492,000 career employees and 119,000 non-career.
And how many are sort of mandated by your union agreements, labor agreements? All of those positions?
No, we have, we've got about 50,000 people in the organization on the career side that would be the postmasters, supervisors, administrative people, and they are not mandated by union agreements.
But, okay, so you could go down, I mean, you have, say, 440,000 that are mandated.
Yes.
Do you have vacancies?
We have vacancies. We continue to absorb the vacancies.
So you're not filling them?
No. We have absorbed 200,000 people into our system in the last
Right.
6 years.
And to get to sort of a break even, is there any projected, is it going to be 400,000?
Right now, if we were in a 5-day delivery mode with downsizing of the network, we think we would be able to support about 400,000 career employees and about 65 to 70,000 non-career. And that would equate to around an operating expense with non-career of about $62 billion a year.
When I notice there are different proposals to try to increase your revenues. Some people may, I support the 5-day service, but there could be the availability of a special service. Is that anticipated, or pay a premium to get mail on a Saturday?
One of the things we've looked at, of course, is to provide package service on Saturday. There is an option if we sort, because we will be sorting mail for post office boxes for Saturday, so there could be an option. If
But
somebody
you could have
if somebody wanted to pay for mail
method and also increase your revenue. I
Yes,
think
there's an option that
I
way.
pay sometimes for Saturday delivery extra with some package carriers, I think. And you said you're $1 billion better off than you were. You've had some reductions. So what's the loss? Is it from 16 to 15 or 15 to 14?
No, the loss this year was projected to be $7.6 billion. We're thinking, and this is not, it's not 100% firm at this point, somewhere between 6 and 6.4. So it's a little better than $1 billion better. Now, here's the reason why. Operationally, we're probably going to be fairly close to $1 billion better. The health care costs are fixed, and we'll have a little bit better of a rate change with the interest rates, which help us in the long-term liabilities for workers' comp, so we get some credit on that.
Well, just finally, the unfunded liability, the report I got says about $100 billion in unfunded liabilities. Is that correct?
High 90s, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mike. We'll now recognize Mr. Clay for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And according to a recent press release, the APWU's 2010 to 15 collective bargaining agreement saved the Postal Service almost $3.8 billion over the lifetime of the contract. Mr. Guffey, considering those savings, would you say that Postal Service's financial condition was taken into consideration when you negotiated that agreement?
Definitely, definitely. Every negotiations and every arbitration, the information about the status of the post office and the problems they're having is under consideration.
Thank you for that response. And the draft bill released by the chairman would require the abrogation and renegotiation of any existing collective bargaining agreements prohibiting the use of reduction in force authority. Instead, this bill would require provisions allowing the Postal Service to unilaterally fire employees. Mr. Donahoe, has your legal department reviewed this provision, and if so, have they provided you with an opinion on what the consequences of abrogating existing contracts might be?
Well, we haven't looked at that. I'm not so sure that today that whenever the chairman spoke, I wasn't sure if he changed some of that. So I think there might have been a change afoot, but we have not looked at that.
I would suggest that your legal counsel look at it.
If the gentleman will yield for a second.
I'm sure it's not too far off from what was initially proposed.
We've agreed to take the mandatory renegotiation provision out of the final bill. It's at Ledge Council being drafted now.
Okay, I would hope their legal counsel would look at it.
Right, and we intend to take that out.
The more eyes, the better. Mr. Guffey, did the APWU's 2011 agreement have a provision prohibiting the use of RIF authority?
There are specific provisions that go into if you do conduct a RIF, and those provisions are spelled out in our Article 6 of our contract. the danger has been, and I don't think it's really a danger because the Postal Service and the unions are both very concerned about the employees, and we've been able to manage the downsizing of our organization by almost 200,000 employees by attrition / buyouts and accessing people to other crafts or to other functions. And I would caution that the repeal of the contracts or to prohibit negotiating of these things is not necessary.
And would a new collective bargaining agreement require the consent of your members?
Yes.
Okay, and Mr. Donahoe, is there a particular reason why the Postal Service has chosen not to try to renegotiate RIF authority in its existing collective bargaining agreements?
Not that I'm aware of. We, as Mr. Guffey said, we've worked very hard over the last number of years to try to make what we call for soft landings for people. As a matter of fact, the latest negotiation, we were able to reach an agreement to expand the number of non-career people. We've got about 30,000 on the rolls, and they would be used if we needed to as a buffer for any big loss in volume. They're hired with the idea that they are only temporary, so we've tried to figure out how to give the Postal Service the flexibility if workload changes.
Also, the chairman's bill would replace the current conventional arbitration process with a last best final offer process. This process establishes a set time frame within which an arbitration board must select a final offer. Mr. Guffey, as the president of APWU, do you think the current arbitration process moves too slowly?
It definitely moves too slowly, but the goal of the union and management both is to negotiate an agreement, get to an agreement. There's been a few times in our history where we've had to go to arbitration. In those panels right now, there's always a neutral. There's one person from the unions and one person from management on those panels to determine what the final outcome would be.
And Mr. Donahoe, would the Postal Service benefit from a structured process as required by this provision?
I think that the timing would help if we would resolve things faster, but I like the idea of having a little bit more flexibility in terms of what we do now. We have used what's commonly referred to as baseball arbitration, and it can be a little bit worrisome. It's a lot less predictable.
Thank you both for your response. I yield back.
Thank you very much. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massey, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Donahoe, in talking about the partnership with UPS and a press release called Brown and Blue Make Green, you said that it's a great template for how post and private enterprises can work together to better serve our customers, the planet, and the bottom line. We hope our partnership can serve as a model for others to work together in new ways, whether they are competitors, collaborators, customers, or all of the above. Is it a template for how the U.S. Post Office can implement more partnerships with private industry to deliver a better package at a lower price?
We work very strongly right now with private industry in many different ways. If you would take a look at the volume of mail, we have a $65 billion revenue base. It would probably be a good 15 to 18 billion more in just revenue alone if we didn't have work share partnerships with companies like Quad Graphics. Mr. Quadracci's company produces mail, sorts it at the same time. It's very efficient. He can drop it into our system, and our clerks sort it, and letter carriers deliver it. So that's been a very good working relationship. I think that opportunities to work with companies like FedEx, UPS, DHL, Nugistics has been very good, especially for the paying customer, because they're able to get the best price, the best value, and very timely service.
What about in the area of first-class delivery. Is there an opportunity to do something similar to what you did with UPS with other companies to deliver first-class mail?
We do what we call first-class pre-sort now, where a lot of companies actually produce the mail and sort it and then bring it into us. So that's a pretty active process now.
How about in the delivery of it, the final delivery? Is there some way?
Final delivery, to a large extent, we've got a great delivery force out there, and we do what's called a post office or delivery unit drop ship, where a lot of packages and mail come in at that point, and then we deliver the final mile.
How about some innovative ways to deal with the problem of keeping up the rural service to rural areas? What are some reforms you've implemented, but more importantly, what are some that you've thought about that you haven't yet? Well,
we're working with our rural carriers union right now on what we call a new evaluation system. It's come out of our last arbitration. We think it'll be a good process to get a good handle on costs for delivery in rural areas. Of course, there's a lot of work that's been done with both city carriers and rural carriers on visibility. Our visibility to package and soon to be mail delivery is going to be very good, so people know within 10 minutes of when they got mail in their mailbox.
How about the services in the rural areas? For instance, when we have a post office closed down, there are certain services that are no longer provided. Are there opportunities to work with
Yes.
private organizations there?
We're doing what's called the post plan, which is trying to match up the revenues and the workload on the window services. But we also have opportunities for people like in a small store to have what's called a village post office. We've got about 350 of them now, with another 100 on the way. Where if you own, let's say, a small gasoline station in a rural area, it's a little bit extra revenue, and it creates foot traffic too, where people can come in and mail a package or buy stamps at their local store.
So far, is that a model that you think could work or
Yes.
is working?
Absolutely. I think that there's been a lot of interest, and we'll continue to expand in that area.
So what is your overall plan for addressing the financial crisis that the
Financial crisis pretty much boils down to this. We've got to resolve the healthcare issue. As I was saying to the chairman when people came back in, it is worth $8 billion. We strongly advocate exactly what he's mentioned about moving out, taking a look at the entire federal system. We overpay substantially for our retiree health benefits, as Mr. Guffey mentioned. On average, we pay $10,000 for a post-65-year-old retiree, when in fact that post-65-year-old retiree should be paying $3,300. Very inefficient. Big changes there. 6 to 5 day delivery. We keep Saturday delivery of packages. We're looking for some other changes in structure as far as some of the opportunities for new growth.
But there's still opportunities available to partner with private industry, and you found that to work so far
Absolutely.
in rural
Absolutely.
areas and with the
rural, city,
parcel.
across the entire gamut, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now go to the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Donahoe, I just want to, for the record, just express my disagreement with you on going a 5-day. You know, I think America's on a 6-day schedule now, and we've had this conversation in private. You're a good man. We just disagree on this. I just think that America's business and America's workers, America's families, we're on a 6-day schedule, and I am very concerned that by stopping delivery on Saturday, which is pretty much the consensus day that will be dropped off, we would basically enhance or exacerbate the downward spiral of the Postal Service, and we would lose a lot of volume, which is our problem right now is we don't have enough volume of mail. And I think by eliminating Saturday, we're going to exacerbate that problem. We're going to have less volume, and it's going to, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I could just picture myself as a consumer, and I'm about to mail something on Wednesday or Thursday, and if I know it's not going to get there by Friday, and it's closed on Saturday, and it's closed on Sunday, well, wouldn't it make more sense for me to call UPS instead of putting it in the mail? I just think you're going to invite a further decline. But that's me. That's my shtick. But I want to talk to you about door-to-door delivery, and I have great sensitivity to the rural community. I do. I understand. A lot of the rural communities consist of a gas station, a post office, maybe a grocery store, and that's downtown for a lot of those small towns. So losing a post office is a big thing. It's a big deal. It could be very damaging to rural communities, especially given the fact that you might have to drive another 200 miles to find another post office. So I am very sensitive to their needs, and we got to figure out a way to hold them harmless if possible. And I appreciate Mr. Smith's testimony earlier. But I also see a proposal in the chairman's bill that says that, well, for instance, right now, according to your folks in our briefing, they said you provide door delivery to about 37 million, a little bit more than 37 million homes and businesses. And the chairman's plan is to eliminate 30 million of that in door delivery, and that's largely urban. And the idea is to replace that with cluster boxes or some other means of delivering mail. Now, I come from a very thickly settled, densely settled urban neighborhood where the houses are basically attached. There's no open space. There's no place to put a cluster box. And you're talking about basically eliminating door delivery for urban residents. I don't see how this works. And I'm not just speaking for South Boston or for the city of Boston. I'm talking about New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Houston, Baltimore, you know. So, and on top of this, you're going to have to buy land or find land and then construct these cluster boxes. I don't understand how you're making money on that instead of having somebody just deliver it the way they have been for the past 80 years.
Well, let me comment on a couple of those. First of all, in the small post offices, we have the post plan, so there's no plan on closing small post offices. So, you know, those towns that have just got the gas station and whatnot can rest assured we may have fewer hours there, but we'll keep open. In terms of 6 to 5 day delivery, my biggest concern is as we lose volume, we do not want to raise prices to make up the difference, so we've got to cut some infrastructure out. And that's what's driven. We certainly aren't excited about moving in that direction, but our fear is if we don't do something from an infrastructure standpoint, it'll push price. But let's talk about cluster boxes. Cluster boxes are an interesting proposal because if you look at what customers say when you make change, it's probably the biggest thing that upsets customers. So as we move into that area, there's definitely an economic opportunity. It costs about $161 per year for delivery of the cluster boxes versus $353 for a door-to-door. But what we're looking at is there a way to make this a win-win? So that if you put a cluster box, say in a street in Boston or Baltimore or Northern Virginia, could you set it up in a way that's designed differently than we have today? Today, you see, we've got 2 slots for packages and 10 or 12 slots for letters.
What I'm trying to say is, though, you have to knock a house down.
No, well, there's ways of looking at this. We've been looking to try to figure out how you'd have a freestanding unit that you could put packages in as well as mail. And so that if you were worried about having to come home and then go to the post office to pick a package up that you ordered on eBay or Amazon, we could put it right in your box. So what we're thinking is if we can design these things in a way that you can fit more than just a couple of letters in, people may start to like them. And what we'd try to do would be to work with neighborhoods to test them out and see what the feedback looks like. I've had door delivery in my house, I've had cluster box, I've had street box. With a cluster box, it's pretty good and once you understand how they work. And I think the key thing for us is to make sure that customers see it as a win and not taking something away from them.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, the gentleman from Virginia.
Would you allow just one observation as a Bostonian by birth?
As long as the voters of Virginia do not mind.
They know.
I will give you that 1 minute, but
Thank you.
Understand it could be at your own peril, especially if you talk about the White Sox.
Red Sox.
Red Sox, White Sox,
I think
those non-Yankees.
Mr. Lynch is talking about the lack of land. I could take
No,
you.
I
My family lives in West Roxbury in Mr. Lynch's district.
Right.
There is no land to put on boxes. There's none.
It's not a matter of what shape the box would be or what you put in it. There is no common land at all. It's so, the urban setbacks are such.
I thank the gentleman.
No, we understand that. Thank you.
Mr. Chaffetz, you're recognized. Could I have 15 of your seconds?
Absolutely.
Mr. Donahoe, isn't it true that the highest density area practically you can name is New York City, and in New York City, cluster boxes are a reality of high-rises? So isn't it true that some of the non-curb, non-chute is in fact apartment houses where there's whole rooms the size of a post office? So at the end of the day, isn't it true that if you do it where you can and do it the way you can, you save money?
Yes, and what we're trying to do in New York, too, is put a lot more package boxes in so we can...
So we can protect the kind of thing you're delivering more of.
Yes.
I thank the gentleman.
And thank the chairman. I appreciate this piece of legislation, the good work that's gone into it. It's not perfect, but it is the move in the right direction. I think everybody understands and knows that we have to engage in some postal reform. One of the things that I'm deeply concerned about, we've heard the mention of rural multiple times. I have a county in my district that's larger than the size of Connecticut. It has 15,000 people in it. And I do hope that one of the strongest considerations we have as we look at how to deal with the rural markets is proximity. That should be the case as it is in the density of Boston or South Boston or Cape Cod, where they just have a ridiculous number of post offices, as opposed to maybe some of the other areas where you literally could go 100 miles before you see the next one. I think proximity is that key metric that we need to look at. At that same time, I would encourage, Chairman, that we need the ability to have some flexibility and actually close some post offices from time to time. Now, I happen to come from a high-growth area. We had a situation in one of my largest cities in my congressional district where there was a major fire. It just so happens that with this post office, there is no longer access from the north end of this facility, nor can you get access to this postal facility from the eastern side, no longer can you access it from the western side. Only from the south side, with no sidewalk, can you actually get to this post office. We have been begging and pleading with the Postal Service to look at the extenuating circumstances, make a change for the betterment of the community, which is a reflection of the postal workers. They're going to be on the brunt end of the criticism that the Postal Service is negligent and reluctant to make this change. And we're hamstrung because deep within the bowels of your organization, everybody's scared to death of making a change. And somehow, some way, Mr. Chairman, there has got to be some flexibility. We had a fire. We're closing in on a year here, and our people are not served yet, but they keep saying, well, we've got to keep waiting because there's postal reform and there's some senators that don't want any post offices closed. We have to do more. We have to do better that way. The other thing that I would encourage, Mr. Chairman, as we have this opportunity is, and I've said this many times before, the great opportunity in my mind for the Postal Service is to become more relevant in people's lives. And the balance that we have to find is to make sure that we don't cannibalize into some of the private sector. And so my question, which is a long one here, a long time coming, is what are we doing to galvanize other government agencies and be the conduit and the opportunity to be the face, if you will, the access point for other government services. When I think of passport services, for instance, Mr. Chairman, it's great. That appears to be a great success. When I think, hey, I got to renew my passport, got to go to the post office. FEMA, we've talked about for a couple years, is spending untold millions of dollars trying to recreate and remap the entire United States, but it's the postal worker knows if that sign gets blown down in a hurricane, they know where that street is. They probably know how many people live there. There are other services that wouldn't cannibalize the private sector, but would open up an avenue and a conduit, if you will, so that people can actually access government services. I think in my rural district, I would love to have the state government do the Department of Motor Vehicles through the post office. What a great place to come do that. And yet it would be a good revenue source for the Postal Service. So my question about the bill is the flexibility, but also making sure that we're being innovative, but without cannibalizing the private sector. So that little mom and pop who's selling coffee doesn't suddenly go into business or have to compete with a post office that suddenly wants to sell coffee and T-shirts and other things that they're doing. You have 15 seconds, so good luck.
Pass comprehensive legislation, and it will get people away from being fearful that the Postal Service cannot meet their needs. Get it behind us, and I guarantee you'll see plenty of that spring up because that's what people are looking for. Thank you.
Yield back.
I thank the gentleman, Johnny on the spot on the button 0. We now go again to the Bostonian, the third member from Massachusetts.
That's right.
On the top of the dais, the gentleman, Mr. Conley.
And by the way, Mr. Chairman, there are 3 of us from the Virginia delegation from Massachusetts, including my good friend Bob Goodlatte, who loves being reminded he's from Massachusetts.
Our apologies.
You know, there were 3 of us from the same high school at one time.
Wow.
2 are gone. I'm the lone survivor from Cleveland Heights High.
Wow.
But I do not make it a point of talking about growing up in Cleveland with those sidewalks and those chutes and those doors on those homes produced before 1974 as though that was the only solution to mail delivery. I just wouldn't do it.
Well, my parents appreciate my advocacy. Mr. Donohue, we had Walt Francis before this committee talking about your proposal to pull out of FEHBP. Now, Walt Francis is probably the living, walking expert on the federal health program. He writes an annual book analyzing every single plan and option in great detail, his checkbook. He looked at your claims, which seem a little vague. He said, you say you can better manage health insurance than OPM? Highly unlikely, extremely unlikely, he says. You say FEHBP fails to match other employee benefits. KFF data on private employer insurance shows no such disparity. USPS says it can offer the same and possibly even better health care choices. He says extremely unlikely and inconsistent with claims to offer more understandable set of choices by USPS. You say FEHBP fails to provide health promotion and wellness incentives, chronic condition and disease management programs. Absolutely false. They most certainly are offered by FEHBP. And then finally he says, you say, it can communicate benefits to enrollees more effectively. Well, that's interesting because every employee group I've talked to with the Postal Service is utterly confused about what it is you're proposing and quite anxious about it. I think we heard Mr. Guppy say, as a president of a union, we have our options with FEHBP, and we're happy with them. Is that true, Mr. Guppy?
More or less, but we would be willing to sit down and negotiate with the problems.
But I'm looking at what USPS has posted, the so-called healthcare proposal. It's 2 pages. And it's utterly lacking in detail in terms of if you're an employee wanting to know, well, is this a better deal than I'm getting currently right now? If I'm an annuitant over 65, if I want to look at how it folds in with Medicare, if I want to know what my annual out-of-pocket deductions might be, what about prescription drugs? There is no specificity. So, Mr. Donohue, how would you answer Mr. Francis's rather profound critique of this proposal to pull out of FEHBP?
Let me ask if we can put the slide back up there. Can we put that slide back up with the charts? Here's the way I'd answer Mr. Francis. If you look at the far left, that $10,000 health care plan is what a post-65-year-old federal employee has to pay. Period. That's the average pay that we all pay, any federal employees. If you're in the private sector where you have Medicare wraparounds, A and B, you pay on average $4,500. If you have A, B, and C, which we feel we have every right to, you pay $3,000. Why in the world would we ever tolerate spending 3 times the health care for our retirees in an FEHBP plan when they don't compete it, when they don't offer wraparound, when they don't offer single plus one? That's the way the rest of the federal government has worked. In 1962, back when the OMB was created, FEHBP, it was a wonderful plan. That was 40, 50 years ago. We need to update it.
Can you commit to providing specific data
I can give
and
you,
dollar amounts to
I
this
can
committee?
give you a specific, what you've got in your hand, I'm not so sure where you got that from. But I can give you a much more detailed presentation in person, and we'll go step by step and cover every detail. I would state on the record that it is in the best interest of the federal government, not just the Postal Service, to compete these plans. There's money to be saved. We should not, as federal employees, be subsidizing everybody else like I showed you on that chart.
Well, I'll look forward to the data. By the way, this was handed up at your congressional relations in meetings with our staff.
I'll get you an updated one. Thank you.
Great. Yeah,
Okay.
with specificity so we know we can compare.
Good.
Real quickly.
Yes.
Why haven't you signed an MOU with the Department of Labor with respect to disclosure of FICA records? You're looking at a new FICA process for the Postal Service, but you have not yet agreed to their privacy standards and their concern that could lead to violations of the Privacy Act.
We're stuck between a rock and a hard spot on that one because for years, as I mentioned earlier, we've been working to bring people back to work from workers' comp. We've got 16,000, 17,000 people on a periodic rolls. What we do now is when we have discussions with the people at the DOL, we share that information electronically with the unions as required by our contracts. What we think is if we have to go to the manual process that they're suggesting and a more restricted electronic process, we won't be able to share the information with the unions, and that becomes a Labor Department issue on the other side. So it's kind of, we'd like to get the thing worked out. As a matter of fact, I've written a letter that's gone over to the acting secretary to sit down and see if we can figure this out.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I know my parents thank you for the extra time.
You're most welcome, and your parents are welcome. With that, we owe the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Langford.
Thank you. Johnny, you have a tough job in a lot of ways. You know that full well. Because we need significant reform. You're waiting on the House and the Senate to get its act together to be able to help provide that. You're trying to do stuff in the meantime. And across America, people say over and over again, that's my post office. Whether they like or don't like or disagree on how many days it took to get there this time or whatever it may be, they set their drive home from work based on a certain drive route to stop by to get to their box and be able to check in at a certain time in the morning. There's a tremendous sense of ownership. So I do not envy that task, and thanks for what you're doing and for all of you and what you're doing. There are a lot of folks that don't get a lot of thanks that are out there in the heat today, and so we do appreciate that. Mr. Gifford, let me ask you a question about you. You've made some proposals and some different ideas that are come up. What cost savings proposals would you support that are efficiency structures or that are labor-related or that are the way the post office does its business? You kind of live and breathe this. You're around it. The people are experts that are there. I interact with some of the union folks at our military base that do civilian work. They know better than anyone where the efficiencies are, where they can do reductions and such. Where do you see cost savings?
We are trying to work with the post office right now on saving and transportation of mail. We think we can work with the post office in saving.
Well, give us a couple of those ideas. What does that look like?
Redoing routes and making routes more efficient so that a truck can take more than 1 or 2, 3 stations at the same time to different locations. Making sure that the facilities can handle a certain size truck. And if it can handle a bigger truck, we'll make a bigger truck so that truck can go to 2 or 3 locations. There's a lot of things we're getting into it, and those are in negotiations, and I can't speak on them too much. I said we are willing to talk about doing some more efficient things with the health plan inside FEPA. We're want to aggressively look at those approaches and everything. There are other things that happen on the different types of containers. We talk about on-the-job injuries. And we think there are a lot of containers that are within the post office that shouldn't be utilized when they're utilized. Not that they can't be utilized, but there's areas that they're utilized that they shouldn't be utilized, which by themselves can cause on-the-job injuries. There's a myriad of things that we're looking at in rotations and how to get more flexibility. We negotiated more flexibility with the post office in this last negotiations by giving them non-career people, but we also went away from the traditional 5 8-hour days to allow the post office to schedule in such a manner that without paying overtime, they could keep post offices open later. We did a lot of things that we could do to work together with the post office to provide a workforce that was more conducive to them providing services to the American public.
Okay. Are we at the right size as far as total workforce?
It's hard to say yet. The volume is constantly changing. Like I say, our concerns on the consolidation is when it hits the points where it delays the mail. Right. And when I say delay the mail, we could have instances. I'm from rural Oklahoma too. I graduated with 32 kids, so I know what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. But you have situations where mail was processed in Office A, and now it's going to be processed in Office B, which may be 80, 90 miles away or something. Mm-hmm. The mail that was taken to Office A to be processed was in 5 or 10, 20 different cities around that area, and it would go to Office A, turn around, get back, and delivered the next day. Well, now to get it to Office B, many times they have to change the dispatch times in these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 offices to 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm in Grove, Oklahoma now. I think it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon to make the dispatches so it can get to Tulsa or Oklahoma City to be turned around and worked back. Well, that means if the businesses in Grove, they can no longer put the mail in on their counter for the mailman to pick up because he may not get back to the post office till 5.
Right.
And if he doesn't get back to 5, that means the mail doesn't get dispatched that day. It sits there until the next day. Now, scales of economy are important, and what can happen in these offices, it's going to vary. And I think if the Postmaster General has the tools to get things done properly, I think we'll get it done. We can work together. I mean, I've said several times to the Postmaster General, we are going to solve this problem. Right. We've got to solve the problem in the long run. And I think we can if the post office gives us the ability, not the post office, but Congress gives us the opportunity to do certain things. We'll do our best to work through the problems. It's right. Not in anyone's interest to destroy the post office.
Oh, no, it's not in ours either, nor is that the goal. There are tremendous, Mr. Quadracci can tell you there are a tremendous number of private sector jobs that are affected by what happens to the post office, by rates, by times, by scheduling efficiencies. All those things are all built in. So this is very important to you. It's important to us. It's important to the private sector as well. So it's got to be right. But I do hope there is a way to be able to get together and everybody look for efficiencies and find a way to be able to resolve it. So with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. We now go to the gentlelady from New York for her round. And you are from New York, not Boston.
I am, but I have relatives in Boston.
Yeah, but you're not rooting for anyone with socks in their name, right?
No.
Okay, just check.
Well, first of all, thank you to the ranking member and to the chairman for holding this hearing and to the distinguished panel. I also recognize in the audience the former chief of staff to the committee here, Ron Stroman. Very good to see you, Ron. Congratulations on your new move to be Deputy Postmaster General. That's great, but it's good to see you, and we miss you. So good to see you. I just noticed you. Mr. Chairman, I really, truly want to thank you for holding this hearing. We all know that postal reform is something that needs to happen, and I hope we can work on this in a bipartisan way to make it happen. I have some very serious concerns with the discussion draft of the Postal Reform Act of 2013. As it stands, the current discussion draft requires a dramatic downsizing of the Postal Service, reduces customer service by moving to a 5-day delivery, and guts collective bargaining agreements. I deeply and greatly oppose these kinds of initiatives that hurt seniors, businesses, and take a major step back in the rights of hardworking letter carriers. These kinds of initiatives not only hurts seniors, rural areas, and low-income urban areas, but many businesses and postal workers will be hurt. I do, however, want to commend the chairman for including in his discussion draft the underwater classes provision to address the problem of mail classes whose rates do not always cover their costs, such as magazines. Too many magazines are going out of business. This provision prevents a seriously negative impact on the magazine publishing industry, which employs a great number of people in our country. much of which is headquartered in my congressional district, including Time Inc., Hearst, and Condé Nast. The draft takes a sensible approach on this issue, delaying the implementation of any rate increase on periodicals and other so-called underwater classes of mail until the Postal Service has time to remove excess costs from the system. After 2 years of reforms at the Postal Service, if periodicals do not cover 90% of their true costs, a reasonable rate increase of 2% would go into effect. I think this approach makes sense, and I hope it is included in whatever final postal reform bill this committee considers. Mr. Donahue, I know that there's a review of postal services across the country, and I want to know your criteria specifically in closing post offices. If you look at cost benefit, are the post offices making money? Regretfully, I've had some cases where the post offices are making money, literally a profit, which is what we want. In fact, the competitors are opening up stores across the street or next door to them, hoping that people will come to them instead of staying in the lines at the post office. But even when they are making money, they are sometimes slated to be closed. And I'd like to know, what is your criteria for closing post offices, and why is not the cost-benefit analysis or the productivity, or I would think we want a strong post office. Those that are making money we should be keeping, because that's going to cover the costs. So.
Yes, I agree with you. We have a process for large cities all the way down to the smallest rural office that we do a review if we do propose any closures. We have really moved away from that to a large extent as we've put changes into place to change hours, mainly in the smaller offices. In a big city like New York, what we've run into, and I think there's been a couple in your district where we've unfortunately lost the lease on the building that we were in. And then we've had to move. So I know that we've been actively seeking some retail space in your area because some high-rises are being built, and buildings that we were in for probably the better part of 30 or 40 years we're now forced out of. We are looking at relocating in some cases. Other cases, whether it's stamps online or being able to pick postage up at a local drugstore in the city, we're moving in that direction too. So I think the key thing for working with your people in the Upper Manhattan area is to make sure that we do a good job to find the retail space close so that we don't have to move too far away from the places where we lost our lease. So you've got my commitment to work with you on that.
Thank you very, very much, and I want to commend the postal workers. They work in, really terrorist conditions. The anthrax has been discovered in the mail in several offices in the great city of New York, and they have responded with great courage and devotion to their jobs.
Yes. Thank you.
So thank you.
I thank the gentlelady. We now go to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Duncan.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Donahoe, I see that one of your recommendations, and you've mentioned this, is to reform workman's compensation. And I see notes that says some employees have been on workman's compensation, some postal employees since before the Postal Service was established in 1971. You said you've got 17,000 employees drawing what you refer to as periodic payments.
Yes, yes.
How would you reform workman's compensation, and have you done a wild estimate or guess as to how much you could save if your reforms were put into place?
Well, it's been a multi-step approach. Number one, we've been working this issue for a number of years, and the key thing first was to reduce accidents so people didn't end up on workers' comp. So we've been very aggressive with vehicle accidents and illness injury. We've seen nice reductions there.
And I've read there's a big reduction in the
substantial.
injuries. Right.
And we still have people on workers' compensation. Some people we would like to have the ability to have them retired out of the system. And there is legislation I know that's afoot here, both in the House and over in the Senate. We would support that. That would address people who have been on workers' comp since 1981 or 71. The problem with that in some cases is that the fact they make more money on workers' compensation than they do go into retirement. So we've got to figure out how to resolve that issue. The other approach, and it's for a much larger group, is to either help to get them back to work or actually buy them out like a private sector company would do. On the back to work efforts, we've worked very closely with Mr. Guffey. We have insourced some work in which we have re-employed people off the periodic rolls, and it's been helpful because it helps us pull that large liability down. We still have a long way to go as far as getting people back to some active duty. We think that probably there's about 10,000 people who, one way, shape, or form, would be able to get back to work. That's what we're looking at. And then the other 6,000 to 7,000 probably would either have to be retired or have some kind of a buyout. But the key thing here is we have a liability of about $17 billion that is part of the chairman's note that we're sitting on almost $100 billion worth of liability. We've got to resolve that.
Let me ask you this. Another one of your recommendations is to the right to have appeals of the EEOC class action decisions to federal court. Do you have a large number of those types of cases?
What happens, it's a small number, but an extremely expensive process. I'll give you an example, and this is something, this is not what we would normally see in an EEOC type of complaint. We're proud of the fact that the EEOC complaints have dropped over the years. We've focused on that, but we have some situations where class actions come about. We just settled one for $17 million, and the class action was, I didn't get overtime while I was on workers' compensation. If you're on workers' compensation, you shouldn't get overtime. And we had to pay out $17 million to settle that. And there's no point, we couldn't go anywhere from a plea bargain up to an oversight up to the courts. What we're asking for is give us the opportunity, if we disagree with some of these big class actions, to take them to court to have somebody impartially look at them.
All right. Mr. Guffey, you said a while ago your employees are happy with their present health plan. Do you think they would be willing to go under Obamacare, and would you be willing to recommend that they do that?
I would not be willing to recommend they go to Obamacare. Obamacare allows them to stay in their own insurance, and that's what we recommend that they do. Now, we are willing to sit down with the Postmaster General and negotiate on a different type of health care within the FEBA family. I'm a single payer type person. I think you take out all the cost and overhead of all the different plans, the CFOs and the CEOs and all these different people and the boards and different people that these different health plans have to pay. For the same amount of money, I think we can probably come up with a health plan that will deliver services to the membership and to the post office and come up with something. But that is something I think that the type of insurance that our people go into is something that's negotiable, and we're more than willing to negotiate on it.
Have you seen the letter that the three unions recently sent objecting to the provisions or the requirement that they go under Obamacare and give up their so-called Cadillac health plans?
I would sign it today.
You would sign that same letter?
Yes.
All right.
I think it's, Duncan, if I can just clarify the record, are you saying that from a union position, I know you can't speak for all the members, but that if a comprehensive reform eliminated, if you will, sort of the letter carriers bidding within the system and went to a larger group with less overhead, that as long as the unions had some form of representation in that process, they would be supportive if it lowered the cost to everyone? Because right now, the federal employee health care plan has specific grandfathers for letter carriers and so on, if you will, for these special groups. Is that what you were saying? Because I wanted to make sure I understood, because those have separate overhead costs that could be eliminated. We
could come up with a health plan, I think, that we could all tell our members that this is the health plan that you will get your matching funds from the post office for. and it's going to be within FEMA. We could come up, maybe we could. I think there's an opportunity, a real opportunity to negotiate that, to take out all those other costs. Now, having said that, I think the real savings for the Postal Service is in not paying the full freight for the same type of health insurance for the retirees.
Right, and we're working on that. What I do is...
But if you do that and save the money for the post office there, it throws additional costs back to the current employees. Now, working on a plan, a universal type plan, which would give our membership what they wanted, which would, to change the benefits would have to go through OPM. We could probably come up with a lower cost that would also save the post office money and prevent the cost from going up.
Well, and I don't want to take more time today, but I would invite you and the other union representatives to engage with our staff. We have working groups on both sides because we control, if you will, that question for the entire federal workforce. And we are currently working on a reform, sans the postmasters leaving the system, that is intended to achieve several of the areas the postmaster has put forward. But if there's a willingness to give us additional opportunity that would come specifically out of changes as to how we deal with postal to the benefit of all the workers, we'd love to work with you on it. We'd like to make sure you see what we're proposing for the federal workforce.
I understand, but our position is, we would love to provide, we'll provide you some information and what have you, but we believe our position is negotiate with the post office and not with the committee. You understand what I'm saying?
No, we're happy to have your input.
Right.
To be honest, you don't get a vote.
I understand that.
But we are, currently the committee's position, and it has to be for now, is we're making a decision on behalf of the federal workforce. The post office is part of the federal workforce, and so therefore we'd like to have that large section of current and retirees have input into it, just as I would any other federal worker. Like I say, the postmaster and I are discussing whether or not there's a cost savings in departing. The problem we have, and I hope Mr. Tierney will understand, I'll give him all his time, of course, but is that we cannot get a CBO score that supports the postmaster's position. If we can't get that, that makes legislation difficult. And that's why we're trying to work on things which we know will score real savings for the post office and put it into a comprehensive health care reform. And we certainly would welcome union input. In addition, of course, the postmaster has a seat at the table.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Tierney, why don't you take about 7 minutes, because I owe your side that.
Well, I appreciate that, but I don't think my time will take all of that time. Mr. Donahue, I just really wanted to finish on the thought that Mr. Connolly started about the Federal Employees Compensation Act. You had not signed the Memorandum of Understanding. That's your answer was to him, right?
Yes.
So the Department of Labor says that these FECA records really require protection under the Privacy Act. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you, or does the Postal Service ever disclose the FECA records? And if you do, in what circumstances?
I'll have to get back to you. I don't know what we do with those other than share information, talk with the doctors, and there may be some time when, if there was a grievance filed, that some information would be shared with the unions, but I cannot tell you that for certain. I'll have to follow up on it.
You'll follow up with the committee and get us that. Thank you.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. Has the Postal Service ever used the FECA record to discredit an employee when that employee was before the EEOC or the Merit System Protection Board?
I'm not aware of that, but I'd have to get back to you on that.
And would you do that as well? Check and tell us if any instances where that happened? As a general matter of policy, would you generally commit that you would not use them in that way?
Absolutely, we wouldn't want to do that, no.
Okay. The Department of Labor went to the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel to get an opinion concerning your dispute.
Right.
They reported back that they thought the Office of Legal Counsel agreed with them on the matter, and you, however, wouldn't participate in those conversations. Why not?
Me personally, I was...
the Postal Service. Why would the Postal Service?
I'm not aware of that. I would have to get back to you on that, too.
Okay. So what the Department of Labor said the Office of Legal Counsel determined was that the Department has exclusive authority over the FECA records.
Right.
On that. Following that, they then told this committee that they no longer provide access to the FECA records to the Postal Service.
Yes.
Has that caused you problems in any way?
It hasn't caused problems in the short term, but it will cause problems in the long term because you turn the whole process into a manual process. I think there's a win-win in here somewhere. Like I told Mr. Conley, we don't want to end up in a situation where we end up violating agreements that we have with the unions because of other agreements that we've made. So we've got to figure that out.
Okay. So when you report back to the committee, will you be able to share with us the reasoning behind your reluctance or the Postal Service reluctance to sign that memorandum of agreement?
Yes. The other thing, as I mentioned, we've sent a letter up for me to go up and speak with the acting director so that we can, or acting secretary, so that we can get a common area of where we might be able to work together on that.
Okay. Barring Mr. Lynch or the ranking member having any other questions, I'll yield back. But I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. We now go to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Meehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, just as a matter to make sure that we correct the record as a
You're not a Bostonian.
well, you know, I've got to tell you, as somebody who suffers as a suffering Red Sox fan for all these years, Carl Yastrzemski would pass out in front of the Green Monster if we thought Congress believed that he actually played for the White Sox. So as long as we can...
You know, it's I'm a Cleveland Indians fan through and through.
My condolences.
You know, they were once a professional baseball team, and they still have a great ballpark. So, you know, as we run down your clock, I just want you to remember you started this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Mr. Donahue, I appreciate the work that's being done by you and all the organization, and the tough choices that have to be made, and the spirit of collaboration that everybody has to work on to try to find resolutions. And I find myself looking for the right ways to help support the post office in making their calculations and decisions. But I also live and work with, you know, my neighbors who work for the post office, and sometimes I get very frustrated with the process that we've gone through, and you and I have discussed some of this. But let me just say that it's very difficult as we're getting to the end of some of these issues, and I'm talking about the whole question of consolidation that has been pushed forward, and I've seen a process, and I'll walk through it. You know, we began with the identification that there was going to be a consolidation that was going to be proposed, and they suggested that there was, you know, a line of savings. And so right from the outset, the southeastern facility in my region was slated to be closed, and it projected a $16 million savings. We looked at the thing and realized that they didn't even calculate within the four corners of the letter correctly. And we asked for a recalculation of that. It went to, and a GAO study to confirm that it was being done appropriately. The GAO came back and said, well, based on the information that you had given to them, they could see how a decision could be made. They didn't weigh in, just that how a decision could be made, so to speak. Then we find that during this process that there's a second consolidation that's being considered, in which even though we've asked for a stay while this is being studied, that mail that was supposed to go to Philadelphia under the process that was being proposed to keep Philadelphia open was actually being diverted to Delaware. It was being diverted to Delaware because there was an overflow, and we really began to question the efficiency of that, finding that there's then a second study that's being done during the period of time that we all believe that the first consolidation is still being considered. Come back the second time and say, okay, they're actually going to consolidate everything down in Delaware now, which makes no sense to me because I've got a big city between Delaware and Southeastern, and this has an impact not just on the Postal Service, but businesses that use the Postal Service and rely on it for its efficiency. So now we begin to see that there's a proposed savings of $13 million by closing down the Southeastern facility as part of Plan B, but we find that it's being consolidated and pushed even quicker. So the bottom line in the process is, how can I have confidence that the decisions and calculations that were made were accurate and correct and in the best interest of the Postal Service, and not due to some other kinds of of issues which, quite frankly, I can't understand because the logistics don't make sense to me, that you would close Southeastern and keep a Delaware and Philadelphia facility within a short distance of each other open at the same time, as well as one in New Jersey right across the river.
Let me comment on the, first of all, the history of Southeastern came about because of the overflow in Philadelphia. And as we built a new facility in Philadelphia in the mid-2000s, and right before the mail volume loss, we've lost 27% of our volume, and a substantial portion of that was what we would consider outgoing mail, which we processed in Southeastern. The idea was to originally move everything into from Southeastern into Philadelphia. As we looked, there were some opportunities to move the 193 zip code area down into Wilmington because of the geographical proximity. From what I know, all of Southeastern, with the exception of 193, is still going into Philadelphia. The Wilmington will get the far south 193 portion, and we'll split the mail up. We've already started that move. We've made these moves because financially we are in a desperate situation. You know, we've been trying to keep our head above the water. We've got 8 days of cash on hand, and I know, it hurts when it happens to a local facility, but we've had to make these changes across the country. There will be no service degradation because Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Southeastern are all considered overnight service. That will not change. And we'll watch that like a hawk. You've got my commitment, but we've got to make these changes. We just have too much capacity. We've got to take the capacity out of the system. We can eliminate the building in Southeastern. We'll be able to find jobs, landing spots for the people. Most of them are within that area anyway, and we'll continue to make sure we provide great service.
Well, let me ask you about some of those employees right now. What kind of job security is there for those who are at Southeastern? Is there an assurance that they're going to continue to receive work within the area?
We have eliminated in the last 6 years 200,000 jobs. In the last 13 years, 314,000. We've never laid anybody off. Never. I have been fanatical about holding jobs, using overtime, non-career people. We always find a landing spot. Mr. Guffey and I work together to eliminate the need to access people for farther distance than 50 miles. That makes us even hold ourselves more to account to try to find landing spots. Because when you start moving people over the country, it's bad for them personally. Economically, it's a disaster. And so you've got my commitment that we will find landing spots for the people in Southeastern. We know that. I know that for a fact as I sit here.
All right. Well, thank you. Mr. Chairman, just one last question for Mr. Kudraki. The company prints all kinds of different mail, and in my region as well, including standard flats and magazines. And I have heard from some of those who do that in my area that aggressive postage rate increases for their mail can sometimes be devastating. Can you tell me from your experience what happened to your business with the postal rate increases once you began to have to deal, whether in the end it was really more cost effective, that you might lose more business by virtue of the rate increase? Tell me how you were impacted by that.
Well, 2007 would be the last example where it was the last time they could raise prices beyond the cap. And there were double-digit increases, to many of my clients, and we saw double-digit decreases in volume as people pulled back. And I was explaining before that a lot of it has to do with, there's different files that people mail to. One is a prospecting file where they're trying to get new customers, and that one is very delicate based on response rates. And so if you get a rapid spike in pricing on postage, you'll see them cut that way back, and we saw it. In fact, the whole industry saw it. We ended up consolidating a couple businesses that couldn't make it because of this, much larger than us. Some of them in your district were a part of that. And as a part of that, we closed over 21 plants to right-size the infrastructure. And it was tough. I mean, I know it's important to try and save jobs, but in the private sector, we had to release jobs. Very tough for us to do as a company, but to be sustainable, we made the tough decisions. Let's put this into perspective. Since 2001, postal rates went up 50%. Since 2001, print prices went down 33%. And we've had to make tough changes every part of our business to stay profitable, and we've been able to do that. And so, when you talk to the private sector and you're dealing with a declining situation, you have to get ahead of the curve. You have to make the tough decisions to do it. It's challenging, but it's real. Those price increases beyond a CPI have devastated this industry, and it will devastate it again if we let that happen.
Well, thank you for your...
I thank the gentleman. We now go to the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this very important hearing. Mr. Quadracci, I want to sort of follow up a little bit. It would seem to me that some of the mail that's going out in the standard flat rate catalog specifically are generating more mail and mail that actually generates more revenue. So when when people decide to purchase something and now that has to be delivered via package mail, does your industry keep any data, statistics on that, and how much subsequent mail is created out of the catalog mail?
I'm not sure if we have some of that data. Some of the organizations might, but there has been a decline in catalog mail through this time frame. We're seeing some stabilization, but there's still decline. It does generate package products, through the post office, which is a good thing.
Thank you. Mr. Donahue, do you have any data on it at all in terms of how much follow-up mail at a higher rate such as package mail is generated by the catalog mail delivery?
There are some statistics, and we can get that for you from the industry. To Mr. Quadracci's point, some catalogs a lot of times will generate first-class mail and then packages too. So there is a multiplier effect, and I can have our marketing people get in touch with you on that.
That would be great. Thank you. Mr. Donahue, on the second quarter of this year, the Postal Service reported having approximately 616,000 employees, of whom 498,000 were career. Yes. Is it correct that this is the smallest workforce of the U.S. Postal Service since 1966?
Yes, it is.
Could you explain why labor costs continue to represent such a large portion of your overall costs?
Labor costs are high in terms of total for two reasons. Number one, we are a people-intense organization. A lot of times we're compared to FedEx and UPS. They're both great companies, but they run air systems. They run airlines, I should say, large trucking firms. We contract a lot of that type of work out. The major driver for our costs are the benefits costs. As I mentioned before, it's 48% of our costs, a large chunk with the pre-funding, but we also think there's some efficiencies that we can get working with the unions and with everyone here around the health costs for the current employees.
Okay. So under the Chairman's bill, postal employees will receive lower employer contributions to their health benefits and life insurance than they do now. Requiring that the employees contribute more. That seems to me to be a pay cut for the current postal employees.
We're working through that right now. So in the course of the last 3 years, we've moved management employees to, we will be very close to the federal rate, I think in 2014. It's been a part of our union negotiations that will start back up in 2015, and of course we'll ask to continue to move that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Guffey, did APWU's most recent collective bargaining agreement with the Postal Service include any concessions to incrementally increase your members' share of these costs?
Yes, we moved, I think, 3 to 4%, so much per year. Like I say, these things were won and sometimes in the past based on the wages then. We took less wages to get more pay for the health benefits. And now the Post Office is negotiating to take it back. And that's why we don't believe it belongs in legislation to require us to go there, because it's a negotiation issue. They're not in the same legislation. They're not trying to give us back what we gave up to get that. And we think that's imperative. And when you have a labor organization dealing with management, it's a give and take, quid pro quos and what have you. And to take back our quid pro quo for something that we gave up years ago is just, we think is not right.
So how would the Chairman's bill affect the agreement that I was just talking about with the concessions to incrementally increase your share? Are you saying that this bill would actually do that?
We think that we haven't seen the final of the bill and everything, but we believe that anything that deals around labor relations and negotiations should not be legislated. It should be allowed maybe under the bill, but not required. And that's what I was talking about earlier with dealing with the Postmaster General and a whole realm of issues that we can work through a lot of issues if we have the ability to do so.
Thank you. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Would the gentlelady yield just for a colloquy?
Yes.
So that the gentlelady understands, the intent of the bill is at the expiration of their contracts, they would harmonize with the rest of the Federal workforce. However, the intent, and clear intent, and I want to make sure it's understood during the markup too, is that that allows 100 cents on the dollar to be moved back into pay or other benefits not covered by Federal harmonization. So the intent was to be able to say once and for all that Federal workforce has, based on category, substantially the same reimbursements, benefits, retirements. That was more a matter of comparing apples and apples, because for this Chairman's time, there's always been, well, they make less, but they do this, but they don't do that. And quite frankly, our employees here in the House, employees over at the White House and so on, we wanted to make a statement that if you're a Federal employee, to the greatest extent possible, the benefits, which are not ordinarily negotiable, in other words, Federal workers cannot negotiate benefits as part of their collective bargaining. The union can, but to be honest, it created a different interpretation of what a fair reimbursement was to a Federal worker. So although it's open to amendment, and we're certainly happy to take your input, the intention in the bill was to not reopen negotiations. We're clearly saying that it simply would be harmonized when they renegotiate their new contracts, and the intent is that any givebacks would then be passed on so that it would translate into higher pay, but a different benefit for current employees, and obviously it has no effect directly on retirees. We now go to the ranking member of the full committee who has been patiently waiting for his first round.
Let me ask you, first of all, let me say that we got to resolve this. Mr. Donahue, I've said that if we can send somebody to the moon, it seems like we ought to be able to resolve this. And I think that our constituents have sent us here to work through problems, and I think our constituents are getting more and more frustrated when we fail to do so. We have a limited amount of time. We hold these positions for a temporary period, and this is our watch. Mr. Guffey, I insisted that you be here, and I want to thank the Chairman for making sure that happened. I want you to tell me, what is it, what in a bill, we're going to do a bill, what must you see in a bill that would make you feel comfortable supporting it? Can you give me the elements, the things that you must see? Is that a fair question?
I think it's fair. I think personally, and I think my organization would like to see something that took care of the pre-funding issue with the long-term health insurance. I think we would like to see something done with the overfunding of the retirement plans. I think we would like to make sure, and I think I heard Chairman Issa say that they will be using postal-only calculations to take care of the overages in the different accounts. I think we would like to see more opportunities for the Post Office to do more things than other government agencies. We'd like to see them do more and have the postal management have the greater flexibility to deal with agencies or mailers to generate income to the Postal Service. We would like to make sure that the issues that need to be done in collective bargaining remain in collective bargaining. But there are some things that maybe need to be changed in the law to allow certain things to happen. Part of that might be part of the health insurance issues. There are a myriad of things that we would like to see, but the main thing we'd like to see, I think, is just a viable post office for the future.
Now, will you finish?
Sure.
Mr. Donahue, what issues do you have with regard to anything he just said?
I think the key for us is resolving the health care. I think that we're in 100% agreement with that, so I don't think that there's any issues there. I think that probably the difference between where the unions are and the Postal Service is the degree and speed of change. I think we're all in agreement that we have to make some changes. So when we're pushing for the 6 to 5 day, I understand why Mr. Guffey and Mr. Rolando are a little more reticent, because their members are worried about that. So those type of things. I think we're in full agreement with FERS refund, federal employee retirement, and getting the payment set right. We still continue to overpay, and that's money that's coming out of our pocket, the ratepayers' pocket. Those are some things. I also think that we're in full agreement on opening up for new products. You know, there's discussions around other government services, even shipments of things like wine, beer, and spirits. There's a big business in that. We think we do a great job. So there's a lot of points of agreement that we have.
Now, did you have something else, Mr. Guffey?
No, I think I think as long as the service standards, we just want to see a viable postal service, whatever that is in the future.
Now, Mr. Chaffetz, a little earlier, talked about the cannibalism of the private side. I remember cannibalism. I know you remember that. I don't remember all the rest of what he said. But what he was referring to is that he didn't want, when we go into the innovation piece and trying to make money through the Postal Service, that we not interfere with the private side. He listed something about passports and some other things. And I'm trying to figure out where we draw the balance. On the one hand, in my bill, we talk about this innovation officer to come in and bring as much innovation as possible to the table. But on the other hand, you have folks who are saying, oh, no. Don't step on this, don't step on that, don't step on this. And by the time you start eliminating the private things you could get into, there's nothing left. And it's talking out of both sides of our mouths. So, Mr. Donahoe, you mentioned wine. Can you think of other things other than passports? And I think he mentioned a few other things.
I think the thing that we should challenge ourselves with is build things that or perform work that helps not only the Postal Service but others. I'll give you an example. We're working through this whole digital approach now. We think that we can fill a very important role in the space on secure digital messaging, authentication, things that really can't be done by the private sector, because there's always a concern of lack of trust, or who's got what information. From a Postal Service perspective, we think that we would be able to fit in that spot. What that does then, that allows other people to grow. I mean, if you think about the group of us sitting here, we have an excellent infrastructure network of plants and processing centers and RINs for thousands of customers. So if we can replicate a lot of that same thought going out into the future, I think there's a real win for us, and we don't end up tramping on toes of people who would claim foul that we're government and not private sector.
Mr. Chairman, I would just ask for unanimous consent. That the chairman has taken all kinds of time. I want to just have 3 more minutes and I'll be finished. I've been here. I see you reaching for your gavel. Thank you very much. Yes. I believe the Postal, if given the proper tools, the Postal Service could expand its use of new technologies to offer new products and services. I also believe the Postal Service should be given expanded authority to offer non-postal service to check cashing, warehousing, and logistics and facility leasing. Let me ask you this, Mr. Donahue. How much of the space in the Postal Service existing facility footprint is vacant? Do we have a lot of space?
There's a number, I'd have to get back to you on that because it kind of varies by facility. We've squeezed a lot of that out in the last.
Out or co-located with other agencies?
Yes, we've talked to other agencies, we've talked to other firms that would like to move into, use our facility as a fulfillment site because they can operate a little warehouse right there and hand it across to us so we can get it delivered.
So let's make sure we understand this. You all are doing things right now that are in the pipeline that would yield substantial funds that you just haven't gotten to yet? In other words, the deal has not been sealed, is that?
I would say from a digital perspective, yes, we've been careful because we didn't want to get ahead of legislation.
Right, because that was my next question. Are we hindering you from going where you're trying to go?
As fast as we can get legislation.
You didn't answer?
That, yes.
You're not
hindering. As fast as we can get the legislation passed, that helps us.
So in other words, you're out there and you're going towards some things, and you're kind of worried that you don't want to reach a deal, or you can't reach a deal, or you're sitting down with somebody to reach a deal, but you're so worried that the Congress has not caught up with where you are, and so even if you were able to reach a proposed deal, you couldn't carry it through right now.
That's in some cases, and in some cases the opposite, where customers are a little afraid to do deals with us because they're afraid that we would have some problems with our finances. So it goes both ways.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for being here very much. With that, this hearing is adjourned.